To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. I am back. It's Kristen Sonata-Walker. I am here with Dr. Lisa Day, registered nurse and clinical psychologist. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Kristen.
So today we are going to talk about solitary confinement, the realities of remote learning. Lisa, what are you seeing going on out there with all this Zooming going on?
I know. Well, I chuckle because inside my mind, the theme of solitary confinement has been social quarantine. I've been looking at this and seeing it from so many different directions. But as I've watched us, in spring, jump to remote learning, and then the kids, the students had the summer off, but then now as fall's here, moving back into various remote learning setups, be it fully online, partially online, completely in school, or a mix of that, meaning I have some folks who half the class is in class, the other class is online, and then they switch the next day. But regardless of those, what I'm seeing really is a crisis emerge in our student population, and symptoms of which, resemble what we see in solitary confinement. So what started off as a humorous, kind of my sense of humor of trying to navigate these difficult times of quarantine is really becoming quite concerning. And but before I would launch into that, I want to put it into perspective, Kristen, because when I was looking, at figures, because I thought that perhaps I was exaggerating them. I'm not, and if we look at worldwide, apparently there are like 870 million students who are unable to be in an educational process right now. And so when we talk about the remote learning today, I don't want to come at it dissing it. I want to come at it understanding the challenges of it, but also being grateful that we have at least that opportunity of potentially being able to hold on to the passion for learning in a time where it's been pulled up, right from underneath our legs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things where, you and I had gotten involved in something to do with talking about the dangers of social media and digital technology, and that will do what it's going to do at the right time. But of course, COVID comes in and then the world changes. And I felt like that would have been so out of tune with how we need to talk about these things now. You know what I mean?
Oh, it came to a screeching halt.
Yes.
Well, and what's interesting, Kristen, is that our concerns when we were on that just 7 months ago, really, was the effects that social media has on the development of self. Right. And now we have this compounded factor of quarantine or social isolation or loneliness on top of our concerns of the effect of social media and technology on people. So it's been compounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we look at the effects, I'm seeing a profound fallout. When we look at, I know it's solitary confinement, when we look at symptoms of solitary confinement at a neurochemical level, it's what I'm seeing emerge in students today. So and there's been interesting studies, whether they're people who've been in solitary confinement for 6 months, 8 months, or 6 years, or on other studies, as much as 1 day, what we see is that there's negative effects at a neurochemical level. There's a negative effects on the hippocampal complex, that's a little bit of a mouthful, the hippocampal complex, and on the amygdala. And what we see in the hippocampal complex is a decreased effectiveness of memory and concentration, therefore affecting learning. And then the effects that we're seeing on the amygdala is an increase in the size of the amygdala, which consequently gives anxiety and fear. So what jumped out at me when I was, playing with the thought of doing this for a podcast is that's exactly what we are seeing in students across the board. They're having tremendous difficulty with concentration and memory and learning, and they're having a heightened level of anxiety and fear.
That's already in a time that caters to all of that for obvious reasons.
Right. And so, when we look at it, even if, I've got different clients from different walks. I've got elementary school clients, I've got middle school, high school, and college students. And I can tell you that not one of them in any of our sessions have said, oh yeah, this is going well. This transition is just fine. What I'm getting are huge complaints, with mental health symptoms. And you and I, we've talked a whole lot about anxiety within the teens and with the student population, and increasing concerns in the last decade, if not 2 decades, with student mental health. What I'm seeing now is even worse. Clients are anxiety, stress, depression, hopelessness, anger, irritability, hostility, panic attacks, difficulty concentrating, poor impulse control, social withdrawal. It's a collapsing, really, of one's ability to function. And so in looking at, remote learning, how can we, one, validate that this isn't a established learning protocol with great validity and reliability shown to be effective, and how can we, look at how to cope with those challenges as we navigate the next 6 months, 2 years, 3 years? I don't know.
Right, exactly. And what's interesting too is, and this is a small, very small piece of this, but I was thinking about this yesterday as I was hearing all the news stories about parents dealing with, all the ways jobs have had to change in order to be home with your kids and do their schooling. And something as simple as there's no more snow day.
Oh,
Because you can, just something as simple, they don't even get a relief, what were we preaching pre-pandemic with what we were doing about digital media, or anything to do with technology? We were preaching, time without your phone, be in nature, go be with your friends and pay attention to your friends, when they're talking, look in their eyes, touch, hug. All that went out the window. And there's no escape because, you can't do a Zoom to get your homework done today. Well, yes, you can. It's just snowing outside. Like there's no escape.
Well, and I think that's the point right there, is why it looks like solitary confinement, is that there is no escape.
Yep.
It's perpetual. I was talking with a young woman, she's a senior in high school, and she said, I have 7 classes online, and then I'm done with school and I look at my assignments online, and I'm referred to videos online, and I have to complete my work online. Lisa, I feel like pulling my hair out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that no escape, which really does trigger the amygdala, the fight or flight, the anxiety and the fear. And it's a strange time. It's a difficult time, and it's unprecedented. And so, when I had a mother in here earlier today, and how's it going? And she just said, my kids are crumbling. She goes, I don't know what to do and how to support them. And again, I tell her that this is a platform of learning that has no previous testing. It has no validity. It has no reliability, and we have no idea the success that it's going to be. And so, how can we support our families? How can we be realistic toward ourselves in navigating through a dynamic that is got a plethora of mental health fallout from it? How do we strike balance?
And we don't, that's, what you're saying is also that we don't know how to do it in a way that is mentally healthy because there's not enough data, because we've never been in a situation like this before. So we're having to, I am sure that they're going to be coming up with, whoever they is, people will be coming up with, okay, well, you should only do 2 hours here and then have a break. And this is the kind of break it should be based on empirical data, all this stuff that comes in that we learn over time. What's the best way to do this kind of learning? But we don't have any of that yet.
We don't have any of that yet, and we have all variables are struggling, meaning we're talking about the students right now who are struggling with remote learning, but there's also the segment of the teachers who are struggling and how to provide, the academic learning in a manner that there's no experience with, and the families to support the students. So in
Right.
all three of those arenas, we have fires, that are being, ignited, and really a theme of feeling overwhelmed, feeling like a failure, increased anger, difficulty coping. And, my older daughter recently graduated from college, and she's here for a few months, and she's temporarily working in a kindergartner classroom where there are 10 kindergartners that are attending 6 different online schools. And she was venting to me about how there were 6 different screens coming out with 6 different teachers, and she was wanting to pull her hair out, and she didn't know what to do to get the kids to get their work done. And I just sat and I listened to that, and I thought, oh my golly, with a population, with our children who are already experiencing an all-time high of anxiety and depression, we now are in a system that's setting them up pretty predictably for failure.
Yeah.
And how can we move away from a performance dynamic and more into a support dynamic, meaning that how can I validate their emotions, that these are unprecedented times, and how can I avoid, these children do not have super high levels of executive functioning,
Right.
and that's what this system is essentially asking for. And you parallel that with core to the human is experience is the desire to be able to predict and control. And not only for students, not only for teachers, but for family members supporting their students, there seems to be very little ability to predict the remote learning and its outcome, or to
Right.
control the remote learning and its outcome. So a pretty significant stressor.
I can only imagine where I was at as a human being, my maturity level, my stress level when my son was, let's say, in middle school. I'm just picking an age in there. It could be elementary, it could have been high school. So we'll just pick middle school. Him being at home all day with me trying to run my business all day, and all the stresses of that, I wouldn't get as much business, that we'd have a huge financial deficit. Same with my husband, we would have had a huge financial deficit, and him being at home all day. I, I wow,
Can you
horrible,
imagine?
horrible for everybody.
Well, I too, I remember, and I've always been a full-time working mom, and I'll always remember, come mid-August, looking fondly towards September to have structure, to have the return
Yes,
to structure, and addressing that need, to be able to predict and control, because it seems to be such a free-for-all, in the summers. And so the stresses, that families are navigating are huge. But then we have, okay, so they, on their 2 days that they're not in class, what does socializing look like? What does sports look like? Now our students are wearing masks, and they have to socially distance, and college
right.
students are being expelled if they're found to be hosting social events. What a lot of people don't know is that with colleges, they have a staged re-entrance to campus. In some schools, freshmen aren't coming in this year, or only sophomores can be on campus. But what a lot of people don't realize is that many of the college students coming into campus, they come in and they're one person to a dorm, and they go into quarantine, and they go into
Right.
2 weeks of complete quarantine. And when we look at solitary confinement, that's usually like 22 and a half hours a day of lone time, and then the rest of the time they're exercising or doing something. But I'm observing college students to be quarantined over 22 hours a day. They're not allowed out of their dorm. They're not allowed to
Hmm.
go jogging on campus. They're allowed to come out to pick up their meal, only to return to their dorm. And
Yeah.
our kids, our young adults, they're not prepared for that. They're
No.
not, and then if they are on campus, the other thing that I've observed is that they're put into quarantine. So I have observed other groups of folks who they tested positive, and they were put in a hotel room. And again, they're not allowed to leave the hotel room for 14 days. Food is delivered at the door, but they're not allowed to leave to exercise, to go to the store, to get out at all. And so
Wow.
strange times, my friend. Strange.
Yeah. And that's reality. We're not trying to, let's pick the most depressing subject and make it a whole show. Like we
No. And that, Well, and that's, so thank you for the little slap in the face, because we want to remember that there's the other, 800 some thousand million people who are not able to do schooling. And so really what I want to shift to is that, yes, we're grateful that there is an opportunity to stay engaged in the academic process through remote learning. But, really I'd like to explore with you and talk with you, Kristen, on how we can look at it realistically so that we can set ourselves up, set our families up, and set our fellow students or students in our family up for success, rather than more additional trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. So how in the heck can we do that?
Well, and so some of it you touched upon. I think that first and foremost, in this is kind of a coined term that goes around the educational arenas, but we really want to address and keep forefront the needs for social and emotional well-being, social emotional health. And to the extent that, we as parents and families and as well as students and teachers, to the extent that you can stay in touch, with families and friends and peers, other teachers and members of the community, is going to help, stimulate that need for that connection and attachment that we all desire. And obviously, we have to, respect the social distancing and the quarantine, but to the extent that we can do it in the real, or in what I call three-dimensional space, it does make a difference. Yes, everybody's keeping in touch Zoom and online, but there's only so much of that blue light that I think we can take. So
yeah,
how can we spend time interacting and playing? What does it look like to play outdoors? Maybe we can, play croquet. There's no direct contact with that. Is that, we get a ball on the ground and, knock it over to you and you knock it back. But, really emphasizing the need to stay connected and to get out and spend actual physical time with other people is huge.
It is. That's where, exercise, even just taking a walk can, be a huge help. But when we get into, as it starts to get colder, I've thought of that. I'd been taking walks every day and then I had to stop for other physical health reasons. But, I've thought, well, what am I going to do? Because I'm not going to go to the gym.
Well, or if you even can go to the gym, because
right.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Well, and I actually, encourage people to get 25 to 35 minutes of exercise a day. I actually go a step further and I tell my clients, I want you sweating 25 to 35 minutes a day. But if that's not something that you're into or not possible, absolutely, walking, 1 to 2 miles a day. And people are like, what? Walk 1 to 2 miles? It's the winter. I say it is the winter. So get some good shoes, a glove, and a good coat. And that, if we're going to navigate through these really challenging times, we're going to have to move outside our comfort zone and change up, how we operate so that we don't implode, if you will.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I know, the other side of this that isn't great, but it actually has been lovely when I've done it. I do not always turn my camera on. It's kind of like that used to be sometimes you get on Zoom and you turn your camera on. I've never been one of those people. And then COVID happened and everybody's, using Zoom and whatever, and just everybody expects, and they're kind of surprised or taken aback when you're not. And I make that kind of a rule, like, no, I schedule those for special things that I may be doing, but otherwise, no, I maintain the, no camera thing. And what that's helped me be able to do is, it gets old staring at your computer all day long. But I set up girlfriend time or friend time where we all get together, we're all on, and we're laughing hysterically. And,
nice.
That has helped me a lot.
Well, that's huge. And it makes me think too, Kristen, about, I was talking with another high schooler, and, we talk about, low self-esteem and comparison and competition in the high school age. in and of itself pre-pandemic. But
Right.
this young woman was saying just the opposite of that, that she said, Lisa, my camera has to be on all day. That means that my face is up on the screen all day. And if it's not, there are consequences, from at the academic level. And she said,
Right.
it just feels like I'm on display the entire day.
Mm.
And so, how do we unplug at the same time? And so what you're telling me is that freedom to exercise control. And so I think,
Yes.
it's so difficult, if it's just abnormal circumstances, but absolutely. So social emotional health, exercise is huge. The other thing that we're seeing in a lot of school age folks who are, studying from home is a loss of healthy eating patterns.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
the loss of that schedule. Yeah. And so we really want to, to the extent that we can get on a healthy eating schedule and eat healthy, well-balanced meals. If we're in the same 10 by 10 space all day, it's easy just to nibble or to not eat at all. And so,
Right.
to the extent that, families can make it a priority and students can make it a priority and be aware of the temptation to boredom eat or eat high sugar foods, it's huge.
Yeah, because that refrigerator's right there. It's fascinating too, because you can't, you can't control every single, if you're in an office, it's like being in a library. Like there's a certain decorum. When you're at home, your cat, your dog, your sister, your brother, the male person, all of those things are going to come in and cause disruptions. And so the way people have been having to navigate that as well has been really interesting.
Well, and just take it to a average family that has, let's say, 2 to 3 students at home,
Right.
and mom and or dad working remotely. I mean, you're talking 4 to 5 people doing school or work in one location, and it's overwhelming. It lets me understand the predicted 24 million that are estimated to drop out of school.
Mm.
And as a society, one of the reasons I'm wanting to have this talk is how can we support, that we don't
Right.
fall into those numbers, right? How can we, keep a routine that we feel at some level, addresses that need to predict and control, that, that sets a regular schedule. And, and the most important thing, and I don't even know really what the exact answer of this is, but the most important thing, and one of the things that I'm teaching consistently with families and students, is to have realistic expectations, right? To have realistic expectations in these very strange, unprecedented times. Um, realistic expectations may be that I just show up in online classes and I do the best that I can. If I'm used to being a straight A student, it may not be realistic to get straight A's on an online platform. I don't know. When you look.
Right. I've seen a lot of, it's an interesting thing. And I know that this is just part of the human experience, but it's been interesting to, know that things are going to be stressful, but still be upset. Why are things so stressful? And then you remind yourself, oh, because this, and this is going on. So your stress is, quote unquote normal, but that still doesn't make you have this drive to be like, why is it so like this? Why is it so this way? Even with saying, well, it's this way because of what's going on. There's like a little bit of a disconnect, and I'm not sure where the mold or the melding needs to happen, that you can sit with. It's uncomfortable. You're in a limbo land, and not beat yourself up about how you're not doing this or that or the other because of this limbo land that you're in. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, someone referred to it today as the COVID brain.
Yeah.
You can ask someone, when's my next appointment? You say Tuesday at 3, and you say, excuse me, when's my next appointment? Next Tuesday at 3. That your brain is not operating correctly.
Right.
And I liken it, Kristen, to, if we were in a physical war, bombs dropping, and, we're 6 months into it and we're used to that bomb dropping, or we're used to sirens going. And so we're, back to making spaghetti for dinner with bombs dropping and sirens going. We're familiar with it, but it doesn't mean that it's not affecting us at a neurochemical level. And it also doesn't mean that we've moved into the phase of adaptation. So, I think that, the longer we're in this, and who knows, I think we've talked about this before. I will always on the I'm the pathological optimist. I'm thinking, okay, January, we're going to have that, vaccine and things are going to be back to normal. But more and more, it seems like it's more of a marathon, than the site, don't know that I can smell the barn yet. But, so what does adaptation look like? And I think adaptation really does begin, at a cognitive level, that what are realistic expectations? It's okay to be good enough. It's okay if I'm having a hard time, honoring the full spectrum of my emotions, not trying to stuff them that this shouldn't be an issue. It is an issue. I mean, here I'm getting online with you today, and I don't know why my microphone is giving a scratchy record, right?
Right.
But we've got kids who can't get online to their assignments. They can't get online to their classes, and, a whole level of stressors that just haven't been there in the past. And so realistic expectations, cognitively being aware of where our thoughts are. If our thoughts are, I can't do this, this is crazy, this isn't going to work, you're going to increase your cortisol, you're going to increase the fight or flight. Whereas, okay, I'm grateful that we've got some attempt at learning, and I'm grateful that we've got some attempt at this remote online. What can I take in? How can I look at, that while education in the manner that we are typically used to is no longer available, how can I be aware that my thoughts are consistent with my desired outcome? So if I'm fighting them thinking, this is terrible, there's no way I can do this, I can't concentrate, I have no memory, my fear is up, my anxiety is up, then we're going to complicate it further.
Right.
But with adaptation, can we keep our thoughts consistent with our desired outcome? And if our desired outcome is to hold on to some level or some experience of academic learning, that if I have thoughts such as I'm going to have realistic expectations, I'm going to do the best that I can. This is an imperfect platform that has no history of design and no understanding of if it's even going to be effective. But what can I take in? Meaning, are we being kind? Are we being graceful to ourselves? Or are we getting lost in the panic of, I can't do this, I'm going to fail, I'm never going to get to school, I'm going to be a seamstress the rest of my life? How can we discipline our mind to be consistent with our desired behavioral outcome?
Right.
And knowing that that's a practice.
What I'm really curious about now, and we've talked about a little bit of it, but what are the symptoms that you are seeing, and what are the symptoms that people saw, or the what presented from people in long-term solitary confinement?
Well, they're almost parallel. Okay. So if we look at, I'll go through the symptoms of solitary confinement, and I'll let you know which ones we see and I'm seeing. One of the prominent symptoms in solitary confinement, at least emotional, mental health wise, is anxiety and stress. And there isn't a student that I'm working with that I'm not seeing enormous levels of anxiety, enormous levels of stress, to the point that they're worried about if they're going to know how to interact with people once social distancing is lifted. Follow me? They're like, I don't even know if I'm going to know how to make friends or how to interact. So anxiety and stress, huge symptom of a solitary confinement. Depression and hopelessness. I've never seen a time in our students' life with such high levels of hopelessness. I was talking with some recent graduates the other day, and I said, what is it like for you to be a graduate of college at this time? And that was the unanimous hopelessness. We've worked our tail off for all of these years, and now we're out, and the opportunities or the freedom to be able to move in the direction of our studies is thwarted. So hopelessness is huge. Solitary confinement, anger, irritability, hostility. The level of anger, irritability, and hostility that we're seeing in children trying to learn on a platform that is new to them, that's unpredictable, that doesn't come with instructions, is enormous. Panic. I had a client the other day who said he's never ever had a panic attack before, but he found himself not being able to breathe, his heart racing, because he got an email from his teacher that he was going to fail because his assignments were missing, only to find that the assignments were given, but they were lost somewhere in cyberspace. Worsening of pre-existing mental health issues. That's a symptom of solitary confinement. Absolutely. My clients that I've worked with prior to remote learning, their symptoms are far more escalated. Problems with attention, concentration, and memory. We talked about the hippocampal complex, that when we're in this social isolation combined with this high level of cortisol attention, concentration, memory, i.e. learning, absolutely negatively affected. I can't say that I'm seeing a lot of hallucinations in these clients, though hallucinations are a symptom of solitary
confinement, right?
Yeah, not necessarily seeing that, with my students. Paranoia, absolutely. Students are afraid that they are not going to make it anywhere in life, that they're not going to be able to continue with their academic pursuits, that they're going to be failures. Poor impulse control, shoes being thrown across the room, computers being slammed, obscenities being yelled at the computer and other people in the home. Absolutely, I'm seeing that. Social withdrawal. And though the kids are yearning to be with other students and to be out, there's this social anxiety that's emerging of how do I interact with them because I've spent so much time away from them. Outbursts of violence. Again, I'm not seeing it in violence with regard to, stabbings or what have you, but definitely impulse control. Definitely seeing that with the younger folks. And self-harm and suicide, that you and I talked a little bit about that. I was looking at that last night to see if we have any updated stats of suicide rates as they've related parallel to the pandemic. And I wasn't able to really put my finger on it other than I know that what was once 6,000 successful suicide attempts a year in school-aged children, we're now getting 6,000 reports a day of suicidal thoughts and behavior. It's just enormous. So, I don't want this to be blaming on remote learning. What I want us to be able to do is, as family members, as healthcare providers, as communities, is we want to support students that these are unprecedented times. We want to seek to connect and comfort and to say, these are, have realistic expectations. We don't know if this form of learning is effective. Let's just take it one day at a time. Let's focus on the things that we're passionate about learning and know that this is not the rest of our lives. That this is a period in time that we don't, I asked one teacher, do you think that you'll be able to cover the mathematic, material this year? At what level? I said, do you think you'll cover 50%? And her eyes, got real big and she kind of chuckled and leaned back. And she said, probably 25%, maybe 35%. Do I believe of material that will be covered? Yeah. So that's just the reality. It's not a student's failure. And so keeping those in perspective, I think are hugely important, so that we don't find that we're living a life of solitary confinement.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I think about too, some of the teachers in my family, one of their, they were the PE teacher, they were the gym teacher, and, they're like furloughed.
Oh, yeah, exit left. Oh, it was, wow. Yeah.
Wow. There is no PE right now. That one of them was doing things on Zoom where all the students have to get up and do something, and that didn't work for very long because other people are trying to work and do school and what have you, and it just became too enormous to have somebody stomping around in the house or yelling or doing whatever it is exercise wise in the middle of the day like they would if they were at school.
Right. Well,
just all these things that we don't think about, these little details.
Well, and I think that also points out that what's so important is it's not the us against them. And I'm hoping in talking about this today, I'm not implying that the teachers are responsible for this, but that the dynamics of the challenges at hand as they relate to trying to hold on to an academic platform, during unprecedented times. But teachers, those employed or those who have lost their job, are experiencing the same, if not more, stress and how to deliver, this form of education in a way that works for all parties. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to say the least.
Definitely. So I would say, for me, don't, if you're cutting things out of your life, to make way for changing the way things are, the reality is right now, don't cut out getting counseling.
Right. well, and you know what? And that is so true. And, like just last week when I was on a conference call or on a Zoom call with a client of mine, a high school student, I didn't have a whole lot. I mean, I could give her all the things that we talked about here, realistic expectations and good enough. But really, what I said to her, Kristen, is that I can't even imagine what it's like to be a student today. And that all of your emotions make sense to me. Your frustration makes sense to me. Your fear makes sense to me. feeling overwhelmed makes sense to me. And all we can do is focus on taking it one day at a time, doing the best we can, and to know that good enough is okay.
Yeah.
Good enough is okay. Because these are strange times.
Absolutely. Well, I am so glad that you wanted to cover this subject. It's not one with a here is the 100% answer and the to any issue and here's the solution. It's a we're learning as we go. I'd say the biggest thing that's going to help you get through this time is to have a place to go vent about it, to talk about it, to have someone that says, yeah, it sucks.
Well, and to know that it's okay. Right?
Exactly.
So the takeaway from it, or the how to navigate it, is to allow ourselves to experience the truth of our emotions and to not feel bad about it, because this is an overwhelming, difficult challenge, and there's no failure about that. It's just the realities of it. So yeah, being able to process that and not hold it in and feel like it's our fault. It's a very difficult challenge. I told one client of mine, it's like me putting you in the middle of a lake with a net around you and say, I just want you to tread water. Keep treading water, and I'm going to come back in 12 hours.
Right.
How are you doing? I'm coming back 2 days later. Keep treading that water. It's scary. It's unprecedented. We don't know how to do it. And, how do we pace ourselves and keep our mind consistent with, our desired outcomes so that we don't contribute to our mental health challenges that are inherent in the process in and of itself.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, you have been listening to Dr. Lisa Day on solitary confinement, the realities of remote learning. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Kristen.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Meier Clinics podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.